Hello, and welcome to this Natal Chart Synthesis. Time of birth is given as June 18th, 1997, 5:37 p.m., somewhere in South Africa. That places the ascendant at 27 degrees of Sagittarius. So the delineation, after looking at the entire chart, the delineation starts from the delineation of that Sagittarian placement on the ascendant. Now, the ascendant is where it is the birth of awareness, self-awareness. It is the birth of a self, where the process for the creation of a human being's self-aware consciousness starts, and it starts at birth. It is the sign that is rising on the easternmost horizon of the earth, as at the exact time when a child takes its first breath. Now, so in this case, Sagittarius is the sign that is rising on that eastern horizon at about 5:37 p.m. at that location. Now, Sagittarius is the search for meaning. That's what the personality archetype really is. It's part of the long evolutionary process that started in Aries. And within Sagittarius, the psyche begins to connect the dots. Because one way you can abbreviate the Sagittarian experience is that it is the preparation for material success. That is material success that takes place in Capricorn. So Sagittarius is concerned with the search for meaning that enables it to prepare for material success, for the pinnacle of material success. And so every search is conducted by doing what? Opening up a space and checking that space, using some set of criteria. So, and that's exactly what Sagittarius is. It is the searching of a voluminous amount of space, looking for a particular or defined patterns that match some type of thing that you're looking for. And in this particular case, Sagittarius is looking for meaning connected with the birth of the ego. Now, the birth of the ego is not what takes place at the ascendant. The ego is formed later on, after a few developmental sequences. What is born in the ascendant, the search for the birth of self-awareness when a child is just born. What is born is desire, the desire to be. And that is the ingredient that now evolves through all the developmental sequences and cycles to become the human being that is. So the ruler of Sagittarius is, or the planet that is affiliated with Sagittarius is Jupiter. Now, I don't want to go into all the because normally I provide very detailed explanations as to what Jupiter is, why it is what it is, and why has an affinity with Sagittarius. But suffice to say that Jupiter is the planet that is most connected to Sagittarius. It is within Sagittarius that Jupiter finds its most natural expression. So it can be said that Jupiter rules Sagittarius in a sense. So wherever Sagittarius is acting, or the influence of Sagittarius is being felt, it feels like the Jupiterian experience. So when you look at Sagittarius on the ascendant and you examine the natal chart for the placement of Jupiter, you find out that it's in the third house of the natal chart in Aquarius. Aquarius rules the third house. But the more interesting thing about the placement of that Aquarius sign on the cusp of the third house is the fact that just before, going into the third house, on the cusp of the third house, you have Uranus. Now, this is important because Uranus and Aquarius have a very strong affiliation, just like Jupiter and Sagittarius. Okay, Uranus is said to be one of the co-rulers of Aquarius. The other ruler is Saturn. But Uranus is a very special type of knowing process, because when we look at the natal chart, what we're really delineating is consciousness. That's really what it is. We're delineating the way that you experience yourself and the way that you experience your life, different aspects of your life. Now, these aspects are just make-believe. Your life is experienced as one thing all the time. But in order to aid understanding, to help in diagnosing these aspects of experience have been divided into 12 segments. That's why you have the 12 houses and 12 signs and all that. Now, Uranus and that Aquarius represents some type of affinity that has to do with knowing, the way things are known. Now, most people, before they figure things out, they have to reason, they have to think. So the process of thinking is the process of adding 1 to 2 to 3, you see, logical sequence. Now, Uranus is not like that. It is a way of knowing, but it does not follow the logical process. It goes from 1 to 20 to 2054 to 1 million, and then back to 2, and it's haphazard in a sense, meaning that it has its own internal dynamism that is not logical. Now, when the same Aquarius is the objectification of that knowledge, that type of knowing. So it's codifying. Aquarius is the process of codifying that type of thing that Uranus does, in such a way that you can distance yourself from what it is that you know. So, for instance, if you ever learned chemistry in school and you're learning about the periodic table, that's an Aquarian type of understanding. The reason is because you have separated yourself from the periodic table. So you are learning about something that appears to be external of you. Okay? It's not a complete understanding of an Aquarius. It's just an example that I want to use in this particular case. So that objectification of knowing and Uranian insight that is really more likened to extrasensory perception, okay, that is the ability to know things without following the usual method of logical derivatives, okay, where an idea or a vision just pops into your head so powerfully, and then it turns out that idea is true, even though you can't really tell how you arrived at that idea. You might say, oh, it's just my intuition, but that's exactly what the Uranian influence is. And that is what is trying to get into that third house. Plus that Aquarius that sits on the cusp of that third house. Now, this is interesting because the third house is the house of intellect. It is the house where you actually use your mind in a logical, rational process, whereby you start by rationalizing your immediate environment. That's really what it is. You understand your immediate environment through a logical process. You don't have to think every time you need to interact with your immediate environment. That's what that third house represents, in a sense. So that Aquarian and that Uranian influence condition that house such that they force the house to abandon the logical process. That's really what it is, because they are coming with a process that is superior to that, in a sense. So there's a slight conflict there, because the house wants to follow the rational logical process. The sign on the cusp of that house and the Uranus there wants to shortcut this process. They want to skip that process. So the impetus is, whenever you use your mind, it tends to be very, very rapid. You tend not to have that patience when it comes to learning things. You want to move very quickly. And the reason why we're dealing with that third house is because the Jupiter that controls the Sagittarius on the cusp of the ascendant is contained within the third house. And so the third house is the house of the mind, like I've said, the logical connecting process. And what does Jupiter do? It expands the mind. So this is a natal chart of someone who is very, very eager to learn. They have a wide mind. They have a mind that they can stretch and expand. And the mind, there are different types of mental expansion, expansiveness, for instance. Usually, the sign of Gemini sits opposite the sign of Sagittarius. Gemini is the local mind. Sagittarius is the developed mind, the higher mind, in terms of the institutional mind, like philosophy and all that. Now, the ruler of that Sagittarius is Jupiter. The ruler of the Gemini is Mercury. But now the ruler of that Sagittarius is sitting down in the third house that would normally be occupied by Gemini. So that brings the higher mind into the local environment, so that the individual becomes philosophical about their environment. They tell themselves philosophical stories when they connect with their immediate environment. It means that they connect with their immediate environment from a very high-minded point of view. This is someone who doesn't like to interact in their with their local environment in the normal kind of way. There's something unusual about the way they interact with their environment. They see themselves as bringing a higher quality of thinking and of mind into their local environment. So the way that this plays out means that the individual remains, they remain sort of aloof, because they know that they know the quality of mind that they bring into their immediate environment. It's very powerful because it's very wide, meaning that they read a lot of books, they browse the internet, they're constantly looking for information, because that's what the Jupiter is doing there. It expands the mind so that the individual is always collecting data points. They're like a whiz kid. They know a little bit about almost everything. They piece.
Today I want to reflect upon the transit that we had of the super full blue moon in sidereal Aquarius, tropical Pisces. What I want to do in this presentation is expand upon my previous work on narcissism and the Leo archetypal coding that can be deciphered through the word. We already looked at the word narcissism in the context of an esoteric, processed, equinoctial state of achieving balance in the I am, with a Vipritraj yoga happening between the N in Leo and the A in Aries. We connected that with the R in the Virgo Libra cusp as Chitra and Falcon, and the architecture of projection in reality, externalizing the I am on the seventh house cusp in relation to the other as we are, and finding truth in the library of meaning in the context of Virgo mutable earth, opposite to Pisces, which rules the feet. We discussed how narcissists can pull the feet out from beneath you. They can really cut you off from something within your subconscious, your inner child, your knowing, because they do the gaslighting, reality warping, Mrigashira, that I see Sagittarius opposite with Gemini on the descendant would project as the other Mercury ruled sign, having Mercury ruling the 7th and 10th house, and then having esoteric relations of the moon related to Gemini through its planetary goddess status and its esoteric rulership of Virgo. We also see through the Asterian astrology, which with Whitney Houston, we correlated her sun sign to Maga and Leo, and then the Asterian astrology on the face of it just synced it with Persephone, and that's kind of like where the idea for my second video came from. But now with the recent transit of the moon, maybe in Aquarius, maybe in Pisces, because I am kind of like working through my own cognitive dissonance between tropical and sidereal, and I'm looking at true sidereal, or the astral of where things are in real time, and I look at the stars at night, I look at the moonrise, I look at the sunrise and sunset. I use my Stellarium app on my phone, and with mastering the Zodiac and the way those planets are inclusive of Ophiuchus as, the other side of Scorpio, and how the galactic center and the Jeshta Mula Gandanta point makes sense when you find the master key. So mastering the Zodiac and me learning that I was an Ophiuchus rising. And when I was looking at the meaning of my name and I tried to see it astrologically, the first thing that I learned was, okay, my name relates to a lake, K's lake. Lynn is a Celtic word for lake, and K is a derivative of Catherine. That's just something I read online. I don't know. I've heard other expressions which goes beyond, Old English or Greek, and the Gaelic origins of my name has slender and fair, keeper of the keys. He is like God, pure, and the way that unlocked the meaning of my birth chart, because through the tropical delineation I got from the 5 principles of organized complexity, I learned through Natal Chart Synthesis and the process of producing our functional lights and recognizing that process through the narratives that becomes our knowing. For more on that, I highly recommend checking out the channel, The 5 Principles of Organized Complexity, which I will link in the description box, because I have seen astrologers online try to do what this astrologer does, but they, have to go through so many keywords, lumashied all over the place, and me having a north node in Virgo and a south node in Pisces in the 4th, 10th axis, and my north node is conjunct Mars, and I have my midheaven and meridian point in Uranian astrology conjunct my Leo placements. So that combining with my sun in the 7th house, and for the Sag rising, Leo in the 9th, the way my Saturn in Aries in tropical signs created a calibrating system for my ego in relation to everything else in the chart, because I have Neptune and Uranus in the 2nd house of intelligence, so I was always getting these insights in the human design, the channel of synthesis, and I was trying to put it together to create new knowledge, the channel of initiation, and having the cross of education, left angle cross, and being a 6-2 role model hermit archetype with the design of a reflector and the personality of an emotional projector. When he did a natal chart synthesis for me, it really helped me to get out of this spiraling whirlpool of the Lumashi of astrology and the associated psychodynamic mythology archetypes as maps of meaning described through various lenses that I've now seen it through. I've seen it from very fundamentalist Christian points of view. Online, I really got into Now You See TV, and I learned about David Carrico, and he used to do a podcast with a ex-Satanist. Now he has the Underground Church on YouTube. It's a channel I'm also gonna link, and he was kind of like a control system in my mind to always kind of like have respect for the Bible, even if the Gaia galactic brain Gnosticism that was being appropriated through various New Age paid propaganda sources, and then seeing the way people were consuming it online and who was just kind of like drinking the Kool-Aid and who was going through real life get out type of shit like Kanye West or Rashad Jamal and even Whitney Houston, who I spoke about. And it's very strange that like there's a very real element to how it happens to especially our black artists and creators and archetypes on the world stage. It's as if especially more Christ like sacrifices are made out of them. I mean, Whitney Houston literally had to sacrifice her voice for a movie that basically gives the epithet to her life beyond the archetype of the voice as I want to dance with somebody, you know? So letting all this information dance and the Shiva Shakti of the antiadromia and the words and their opposites and their coincidentia, the puns, the interplays, the etymology, philology, all of this coming together in my Geminian brain that through all this Mrigashira searching stars through the narratives and getting a head cut off. Because every time I'm like, nope, this can't be the creator. Nope, this can't be the creator. Nope. You know, there was just a detachment and I was looking for something and I was looking for something and it was like, nope, this system isn't symmetrical enough. It isn't beautiful enough. It isn't integrated enough. It's not saying this. It's not saying that. I was going through all of these information presented by people who assume themselves to be the people who should put that information out there the way they did. I'm not going to say anything beyond that, but what the world mirror of it all reflected to me was kind of like this fractalized soup of things that I thought as a child and things that just like my inner knowing kind of like knew was bullshit. And so my personal Persephone journey towards my MC Maga Leo meridian point, which sits in my tropical ninth house, to be the Ophiuchus golden key light bearer. You know, I looked at my 12th house and the fact that 12th to my moon, the sign of Libra, and Chiron sits to my 29-degree tropical moon placement in Scorpio. But for the Sagittarius rising, that cusp happens on the 12th house, and because Libra and Scorpio through Blavatsky's work and me digging into that, I always kind of like put it together, and Virgo, and it was the scales in the hand, and it was like what I used to see also, for example, is like the pinches of the Scorpio as like a cutting tool, Virgo with a feminine version of like Kronos's tool, and Virgo and the moon's esoteric relationship and its exoteric relationship to exalt Mercury, Virgo, and the relation to the birthing of the Christ, the sun, and all of these things that kind of like tropical and Gregorian timekeeping veils, because when I look at the Stellarium app and when the ingress into Maga happened in through Sidereal, and how it's syncretized with me watching the movie of Whitney Houston and watching things online about the upcoming book and reconnecting it with a video that I watched 6 months ago before I watched the movie, because I'm one of those types of people who kind of waits for it to come out. If it's like something that I really want to see, like what did they do? You know, how did they go about doing this? Did they do it justice? You know, I would like wait for it and pay attention to the discourse, but you know, like it wouldn't bother me really to like see what people would call spoilers, because to me, the more I can see what the filter is and the biases are, the more I can like kind of like know what to see through the movie, to see beyond the movie. And so I watched that movie again based on, you know, having the Leola Brown video pop up in my feed somewhere again, you know, and I was like watching different things because things came up on my feed about Kanye West, things came up on my feed about a mysterious note being passed, things came up in my feed, you know, this, so like the algorithm was feeding me this narrative, you know. The algorithm knew how people were putting dots together, and in my naivete back then, watching her on Oprah as a woman who escaped a Svengali husband, which was something I was very much hoping for my mother, you know, internalizing the lyrics of I didn't know my own strength. So when Whitney Houston went home, and seeing how this movie used the song Home, like things weren't hitting home for me, because I was like, how was her spirit okay with this woman mimicking her and not even having the, you know, the grace to not look contrived, and being praised for brilliant acting, and everybody's just being gaslit by this. And then obviously I knew online people were coming from a personal point of view as well, to be like, I don't feel this movie did her justice, or, you know, and I could see that, and those are people just speaking from their heart. You know, yes, they are content creators, yes, they are probably aware of conspiracy theories and the like out there, but also they did go and have an opinion on something that they wanted to have an opinion about. So that's why in my description box of that video, I was like, I'm not going to be making legally mitigating disclaimers about claims and truth. I'm telling you guys what the astrology confirms based on the fact that it charts as a 2D correspondences, these digital clips that exist in my 3D algorithmically coinciding with not only the Lionsgate portal and the actual ingress into Maga Nakshatra, which, you know, we were heading to come out of Leo and into Virgo as per tropical calendar dates, and knowing how the hand of Hasta and the hidden hand, and even the things in my first video that I felt I was lacking to say about, like on the 7th house cusp for the Virgo, there's that exalted Mercury doing a hidden hand on you, like enchanting you, charming you, deluding you, you know. So at the end of the day, I just wanted to honor the fact that the recent transit with Saturn and I've literally been telling them I am getting ready to make a recording. It is raining. I got the kids to not drive on the little bicycles that keeps making a noise, these plastic bikes. If you're South African, you know. And oh my God, he literally could not come out by the kitchen door onto the stoop. He came out by the front door around on the stoop and had to interrupt the video to get through the gate to a thing that literally is the stoop junctions back onto a stoop that goes into the kitchen door. So how? Ugh, I am so... I can't. And that's like my Mars Virgo North Node thing coming out with like, cut the bullshit, man. Like, did we not discuss? Did we not have this mirror imaging towards each other? Did we not merge in an understanding? So why are we cutting off from all eyes on us all the time? Because yes, we are going towards creativity and uniqueness, but we need to integrate that, and me understanding the relationship of the moon and Aphrodite and Saturn through the esoteric, through Velikovsky's work, Slick Dissonance work, the recent transit, the recent revelations that I had, my own Maga placements, where my sidereal Lilith is. So, yeah, let's just say that from a very unconscious place, I've always known that I'm bringing to light the underworld because, as I said, my codon of secrets in the human design gene key 12 sun tropically was a part that I could identify with. And now that it's kind of a matter of, wow, does the sidereal and Asterian, according to Mastering the Zodiac and the Stellarium app and where my placements are in real time looking back, does it take away from anything that I've learned about any of those obscure lenses of myself? Absolutely not, because had I not learned about what the Scorpio archetypes go through as a Libra and heretic degree moon on the scales of Ma'at, Lady Justice, Virgo, Libra and Scorpio all being one, Ma'at the wife of Thoth and the Asclepius healer, serpent bearer, Serpentarius and the centaur, all of those things, Chiron keying me into like the 12th house Chiron to my moon Atmakaraka rising at the point when I got into sidereal astrology and I didn't know my birth time and I didn't know astrology well enough to apply any corrections and any of the information that I do have, kind of like Pisces mathematics that I do. Comment down below if anybody knows what it feels like to do Piscean mathematics, where it's like colors and shapes and numbers like coming out of like pictures and forms, and it's just like, it's so sensorially synesthesiac like that. My Uranus Neptune second house conjunction and my Uranus sitting on the cusp trying to get into the third house, always forcing the patterns that my Jupiter and Pallas in Aquarius in the third house collects. My Uranus is in Aquarius, but it's on the cusp of the second house, intercepting the third at the exact degree at 8 degrees, which is also like a Scorpio degree, and Uranus exalts in Scorpio, so the whole searching star leading back to Prometheus with this Aquarian archetype and everything that was new age confusing, and me starting my channel, wanting to structure a healthier sense of Venus-Saturn relationship within my chart and Moon Saturn relationship in my chart, and my Jupiter Aquarius Uranus tropical placements, all of that kind of like going back to a Capricorn through sidereal placement. It was like putting it in my second house, in my house of intelligence, where it was actually belonging or acting out all this time. And when all these Navamsha Padas and things unlocked, it further added to why my name unlocked into the correction of these things and seeing it in a much better slip onto myself as the cloaks and identities and mindsets and words that I lived through, and my creative self-expression Leo and 9,000 Saturn Aries in the 5th fade into my Sagittarius ascendant to bring out of the void the expansive contractive Rahu Ketu principle of my Pisces Virgo. So that's all I wanted to say on that part. I am going to head into the next part of the story where we now honor the Asterian archetypes and how the potential Asura Olympian flip can be just kept in the back of our minds while we are going through certain aspects of like things that we have heard in tropical Western astrology, that, you know, versus what the Vedic and the sidereal says about nakshatras and all of that. We are now gonna like dig into it and contrast the two and be like, can every nakshatra in Asterian astrology hold up to Vedic nakshatras and the meanings and the syncretisms of all of that? Because for example, Venus as a guru of the Asuras, and we knowing that Aphrodite is told by Zeus to just kind of sit out of the battle between Swift, Aries, and Athene, who is Venus and Mars. So Velikovsky's assertion of Aphrodite as the moon might hold true when we think of Virgo and the mother goddess archetype and the generation of the physical, and how that is demonized ex post facto, the sexual penetration of the Mars Scorpio Hymenaeus cusping thing and the Vulcan Chitra thing. And here we see, for example, Aries and Scorpio are opposites, and in tropical signs those are quincunxes, but when we include Ophiuchus, there's kind of like a little zigzag thing that it makes sense when you see the fact that Asclepius and Imhotep were the only deified actual Saturn L Kronos establisher of a golden age by having medicine, having healing, having all the charms and things that, you know, was also the character of Enoch and Methuselah, and coming down through Noah and the flood of Deucalion. All of these things leading up to the birth of the ex post facto Atlantis civilization, things that New Ageism constantly like brags about, right? So when I had to kind of like put my world timeline together, and is it flat, is it round, is it a dome, is it expanding, is it contracting, is it, you know, is it all in the sheen of a goddess's toenail? Who is the buried girl, who is Percy, you know? So Whitney Houston and The Voice, it all kind of led these things to be unveiled, because that 7th house Casper has largely Virgo on it also. So it's very interesting, because when we actually plot her nakshatras according to, you know, me now doing my homework and not just like jumping on the train of what Scorpio Oxman and Jade Soluna has been saying, and finding a key to mastering the zodiac and being like, guys, like it's obviously like, I'm sorry, and like I should have taken more care, and that's why I wanted to kind of like update with the keys of the Aquarius blue moon that we had being tropically veiled as being in Pisces. And that's why I really wanted to go into this Revati tail satin mermaid of it all, which we recently had with even Halle Bailey and Uttara Bhadrapada, and typecasting in all of Clay Nakti's work, recapitulating into why do these things make sense? Why did they cast that goal? Why did, certain people in the movie give certain auras and vibes? And, can I look at their charts and placements in relation to the people? So I want to, in this next section, really show you guys that, what, it wasn't just like that was the first part of it, that was the uranium Promethean bolt, but now I need to like learn how to like get that onto my staff Asclepius like, and know how to see the bullseye, see the beast side of Sag, see the galactic center, see the galactic anti-center, see the whole 3D of the Lumashi, and bring it all together with the words, because everything that I felt inside all my life, the reading that I got, the different astrological systems and esoteric systems of information and pop culture expression of psychodynamics that I've observed, all of this to understand myself from that Leo ninth house perspective of all these glimpses in which I can relate. But then coming back to my name, and after all the Chiron, Kalen, RL interchange of going left and right and being on the scales, I was the measure and the ma'at of it all coming together. So my moon and Saturn and my Venus and the Libra placements and the Taurus and the Gemini, and how these things now look in mastering the zodiac and on a true sky contemplation, it makes so much more sense than like what would be said about Jeshta. Like I have family members who are Jeshta, and I definitely like, I can like see myself just being a little tippy-toed on the other side of that void, because I'm just like, exactly. So to me it's like, what is coming out of us, what is behind every shot that we take. I want to be honest and know that like the shots that other people take, shots in the dark, we see that some of them paid off, like the shots Whitney took at certain people, hinting at certain things and whatever. Like now it all comes full circle, and it came full circle also with this Aquarius moon, and like the fact that is the most famous, and that is after Apollo Shravana, and we know Britney Spears has Shravana moon, and that was wholly highlighted in the idea of a conservatorship. And like if we look at Whitney's placements, there's some of that energy from a 12th house going into a 3rd house, but where she ascended from was the muses, and her whole chart, and that Taurus on the IC, and that Revati Jupiter moon mutually receptive to its exaltation planet points to Venus in Cancer, and getting a trine by the Sun in Leo in the early degrees, which on the Mastering the Zodiac chart, it, according to Scorpio Oxman, I made the mistake of charting Maga at just the very beginning, because that's how my programming kind of played me. But when we read the literature, when they say Maga is the heart, and there was just something that made me have to read it much better, and using the sun sign ingresses and the way Scorpio Oxman also plotted it onto Mastering the Zodiac, I learned certain things as to why Jesus's yard pointed to 29 degrees Sirius, Punarvasu, Gemini, back in the day. You know, I will link that video down below. Excuse me, sorry about that, guys. Let's go to the little collection that I have in my gallery. So at the 26th mark on Stellarium of August 2023, we actually had the Sun conjuncting Regulus. So that's what I was talking about, how the Sun actually veiled Virgo season while going on a Lionsgate portal like Persephone to the underworld to deal with a whole nother beast. You know, what I've recently learned also is that there's only one sign of man, and that is why it was hidden, and all the other signs are kind of like chimeric and part beast. You either see them with a hunting animal, or as a hybrid, or as a companion animal, or as, you know, some sort of like twin or mirror image. Symbolically, they are different animals and for the zodiac, but what I've learned about Asclepius is that that is the only, you know, sign of man. So it's very apt that we call Aquarius and we associate that with being a cupbearer to Zeus and the sign of man, and being very it's like the light bearer that was favorable to the gods, because I don't know, he probably just oozed beauty and wisdom so much so that Zeus was raptured by him or something. They do say on KRS channel Jupiter is triply exalted in Aquarius. I wonder why. So the fact that Saturn and Uranus comes together, basically Jupiter's father and grandfather, Jupiter can expound upon the knowledge through these systems that are already edificed and working. You know, like my second name is Ethan, and if you know about what the word ethonomic means, and how, you know, it takes a very strong ethos to remain strong and firm, which is what the Hebrew equivalent of that name means. And you think of like the fire fuel relation to like an ethanol like substance, you know, and the idea of ether, and all of those things kind of connect with Aquarius, and it's Rahu Shatabisha, Jupiter Purva Bhadrapada, Dhanishta, which is also like the muses, and the Aegean for Shatabisha, and the Chimera for Purva Bhadrapada. So the fact that Jupiter can now expand his knowledge and his duty as a compensatory mental faculty, which brings about, you know, the sense of joy and abundance that achieving your desires would imply, you know, because Aquarius, and like the 11th house is all about dreams and wish fulfillment, and all of these keywords get associated to it on an esoteric level, right? Um, when you read Alice Bailey and you look at the signs and their hierarchical rulers and their esoteric rulers and the veiling or hidden rulers or exaltation points not yet mentioned, I recently saw that Chiron was associated to Virgo, the nodes, North Node and South Node to Libra, which is interesting because Libra Aphrodite to the castration of Uranus by Kronos or Saturn or L. All of those things kind of like feed into like the idea of the world of archetypes descending to the world of form, the world of thoughts becoming crystallized as physical manifestation, the Shiva Shakti, Anima Animus, Eros Psyche dance of Uranus and Gaia, and you know, the incestuous embrace of Geb and Nut, and how Shu needed to separate that, how Enlil and Marduk and these gods who, like a thunder god or something like that, had to cleave the sky apart. And we think about the electromagnetism and the poles and the idea of a serpent and serpentine entwining between the two, you know, diegetically opposed poles, the way you have the galactic center and the great attractor and the galactic anti-center, and what, you know, is like the Big Bang Theory principle of expansion, and you know, this hubble bubble of a babble. um NASA, NASA and what we get told and all these beautiful images, you know, there are people who will die on their sword to say like we shouldn't really believe that. My thing is, if things weren't good enough seeing it with the naked eye, all these zoom ins and layerings and enhancings, um like, what does it really do for us? Like, we actually end up with less resolution on what all these pixelated points coming together in a picture means, because not everybody agrees that either the world is flat or what matter is on a subatomic level, how all these things relate to like what your internal experience of your psyche or soul, the psychodynamic experience of archetypes, spirit, your animated life force, the observer principle behind your I am, all of these things, the desire principle that wants to merge to the we are, um, the cut of Scorpio and the placenta, and Virgo being either virgin or whore, and you know, the Prakriti and from the Aditi, and the Seira from the Swati, you know, the sun from this moon, or this space from the waters, or the earth from the stars. It's like we have these separations of things being opposite in ways that they really aren't. Um, like fire is water and earth is air, and or ether, or you know, if we think of like the way the subtle etheric, like from the chemical level of our hormones and everything that we exude, like the pheromones and the subtler and subtler energies that comes out of our Taurus field, you know, and at the center of it we are like something more gross and dense, like a black rock when we look inside of ourselves. And it's very much this as above so below, as within so without of the cosmogony, and the Genesis genes of Isis. You know, when we look at the moon, when it's new and void and versus when it's full, and how that interplays the relation of the sun. And sometimes if we are lucky enough to see a sunrise or a sunset where the moon is, you know, fully on the horizon, and you can still have like some daylight in there, it's really like, it's something else seeing kind of like the way it's almost like this mirror, you know, that like becomes grimy. And then I think of these stories of like incest between the sun and the moon, and how one of them found out by smearing ash on the face of the one who came at night in the dark. And it's also very Eros, Psyche, don't turn on the light. And it's also very Lilith, Lucifer, Satan, don't turn on the light of Adam in the Eve, you know? The anima and the animus, what came from the dreams, what came from nocturnal emission, from the world of the waters, right? And what that faced in terms of like the scorn of the world of the fire. So like the Asura and Venus and fire, and water and Jupiter as Jalatattva, and the Devas, you know. My thing is like, do we have it flipped? That's just my question, like the 1984 of it all. Because this moon, some people say like, oh, it was this wonderful Pisces moon, and then we can just go into a whole interpretation and just like think to ourselves that's what it is, or like find correspondences, because there's Pisces dimension to reality all the time. There's Pisces potential within the scope of your perspective all the time. Maybe that's me with the South Node in the fourth house, but like I can always kind of like see things connect in the way Pisces is described, to kind of like dissolve it all into like a nothing, everything, theory of everything, Saturn in Pisces, Revati for me, according to Mastering the Zodiac. So the human design, the design chart plotted on Mastering the Zodiac also gives me my Mercury conjunct Saturn. So that is why I speak like this, from a Piscean realm, from a fallen Mercury quote unquote realm, but I'm conjuncting it with Saturn because I'm trying to structure something that doesn't have structure, because I have the channel of initiation fueled by the need for synthesis, you know. So when I think of having Ophiuchus rising and the Aquarius in the fourth, and being a cupbearer to the gods, and being raptured by Greek mythology, and being all these things, that's why like the theme of my graphics has been what it's been, you know. I'm fleshing out this channel from a kind of like bottom of my somatic memory upwards, but looking down and within from what I know, based from the cream of the crop of who says what, and what I know as the keys of my own knowing, having been proven true by astrology that I resonated with when it was accurately charted, you know. So I am not discrediting the fact that my astrologer used tropical delineation and accurately gave me a natal chart synthesis, because I am not to say that he wasn't aware of Ophiuchus energy mingling with Scorpio Sag 12th house energy, the way my tropical chart would have given him the picture to use as a point of departure, right? Because in his mind he also just had a Lumashi that he needed to structure, and he calls his process natal chart synthesis and functional lights within the 5 principles of organized complexity. Um, so my thing is I can appreciate what I could learn from all of these people, but as the key keeper and naming things onto myself, I need to be able to put something in a lockpick within myself, and it opens the door of confirming everything else that is. And any of the opposites clashing or word fighting or little things that should just be like, to the Leo ninth house perspective, in the realm of play and in the realm of growth and developing the ego to a sense of self-significance through creative self-expression, by always recombining these ideas and creating new glimpses of myself through the images of my own resonance and remembrance that it resonates with. So the Aquarius moon Saturn conjunction into my natal placements, and how my mastering the zodiac brings the Neptune second house confusion that was in my house of intelligence bullseye. From a tropical perspective, it brought the Uranus, Pallas, and Jupiter into that area, and it gave me my Ceres in Aquarius. And I think the South Node also charted sometimes in Aquarius, 29 degrees. But sometimes it's 0 degrees Pisces, or on Mastering the Zodiac it is like just something also just slightly different. I think it's Pisces, but like a sidereal chart that just uses a Fagan Bradley or Lahiri Ayanamsha, it gives 29 degrees. So, and if I use IAU with a 12-fold sign, it takes my South Node, the 24-degree Ayanamsha, backwards, so it puts it at 29 degrees. In tropical signs, my South Node is 24 degrees Pisces. So Pisces is a big sign, and in Mastering the Zodiac, I still have a Pisces South Node. In Human Design and Gene Keys, I also still have a Pisces Aries Gene Key 25 unconscious design, little red flag of a South Node. And then Venus unconscious design is in Gene Key 36, which is also that Revati area, just based on that chart's placement of where I would need to plot Revati as the final point of Pisces conjuncting into Aries. You know, the tropical gives my Mercury conjunct Saturn in Aries in Human Design. The Mastering the Zodiac plotting of that design date gives me the Mercury Saturn conjunction. Basically, my design Mercury conjuncts my natal Saturn in my design chart placement, like when the soul came into, I guess, the contract of this birth and started merging with the mom and did the whole, I guess, you know, like I've heard things about like stem cells and healing and interchange and things like that, but I just have an idea in my mind that, like, you know, part of that happens when your design starts integrating, when the soul kind of like is floating on the waters while you are genesising your genes of Isis mother, and you are specializing your look out of like the look that, you know, your mother and father androgynously kind of gave you. It's very satin, mermaid, serpentine, pre-placenta magic, cut other side of the womb world. Um, you know, and I think having my Scorpio moon in the 12th house, there was a part of me that kind of like remembered what the 5 principles of organized complexity spoke about, the Mercury in Scorpio video, and how Scorpio is looking for the other and has a fear of death because it is afraid of dying and knowing how vulnerable it is dying before it met this other that it knows is missing, this mirror, this other part of them. Because like the soul is a male female in a sexual union, creating an androgyny of experience that Scorpio is aware of. And when they come into this incarnation, when their placenta gets cut, they literally get cut from their twin flame. Even if their twin flame is birthed in another body and there's a person who looks exactly like them, like technically that person who's the female version of your male birth or the male version of your female birth, you are both of those people simultaneously, and your twin is you also, if that makes sense. And that's the mystery of Gemini 8th from Scorpio. So it's very Emer, like, and if you see the cow in Orion, and you see the cleft of space, and you see the sacrifice of the one for the other, and you see the Milky Way, and you see why Vulcan put her in chains, and you see why the Cain Abel story went the way it did. There's just so much that I can unpack here, but to not go off track, the Ophiuchus becomes the opposite to Taurus, whereas Aries became opposited by Scorpio. So when the Ophiuchus and the Taurus, which esoteric relationships to Vulcan, comes into play, and we see Chitra in Asterian astrology being the cusp of Virgo into Libra, which is where that hand and that implement and that trinket that kind of looks like the thing that's going to cut the energy and make you lose sight of the mother goddess, and lead the pharmakeia and not have the Asclepius Imhotep wisdom of self to heal, the Serpentorian wisdom to use your Kundalini in your Taurus field to manifest from the void. Because how can you manifest if there's not a void of something to draw that in, and a lack of something to create the awareness of what needs to be done to externalize it? So yeah, I had to go through so many things putting these little keys of myself together, and until my name clicked for me, like, you are the key keeper. Like, everything that you are ever going to relate to is just a key to yourself. So understand the self that is seeing yourself through others, and see the self that has been programmed through the people who experience the same schism that I experienced, and then develop the pathology of narcissism, because when they look for it in a twin flame and they attracted somebody who was at the same frequency as them, their mirror image frictioning, the only pull essence that it could create, their well-being, their oyster of coming together as the polarities they identified with. For example, me as a child to my parents, I am the synthesis of that polarity, and now, like, looking into me as a mirror makes them fracture. So looking into the mirror of Whitney as Persephone, a part of that mirror also fractured because the Leo pride and the Persephone archetype and the Maga regality and the Whitney Houston the voice archetype and the fall from grace, and now the Ophiuchus scapegoat hidden mid-heaven, and the Neptune in Libra, and the synastry she has with her mom's chart, and the movie, the conspiracy theories, and the Leola Brown impending book, My Sister's Keeper, and the Aquarius moon, and my placements of having a tropical meltdown because you know, on the side, the real thing is I'm a Cap, guys, no cap. Like, my intelligence is Capricornian, so like even when I stutter and when I'm always looking for the right grammar to structure these mazes of words together so that it's like a labyrinth that you, like an underground labyrinth that comes out to like a, I'm on the top of the world looking down on creation, and the only explanation I can find is the love that I found ever since you've been around. Your love's put me at the top of the world. You know, that is me, like with the self-love, with the Leo energy, with the people who had Leo diva energy. I loved Whitney, I loved Mariah. You know what I mean? So there being a part of myself that was like cut because it was like, boy, you can't sing, you can't do this, you can't do that. And then like gradually I would just like diminish. I would like weigh myself against other people's talent and light and be like, maybe I'm not that good. And that's how I was like Chiron in Libering in a tropical sense, Chiron in Virgoing in a sidereal sense. But actually my Chiron is going towards the soul, Hasta, Mercury exaltation point. So bringing that together with my Prometheus Sun and the Jupiter, which in the Capricorn, and according to Mastering the Zodiac placement, it's like very much at the tail end of Sagittarius, which is that Uttra Ashada Nakshatra, which I think is called Natura. And so the natural wisdom that I had, just the common sense wisdom that I was expressing with my tropical Aquarius self in the third house, and being called out as the weird one for it, and feeling some type of Sun conjunct the descendant in Gemini in the seventh house about it, in a relation to the elites of the 11th house that I can't relate to liberally with my knowledge, and then being wounded by that because it's like, you know, the way my astrologer said, with my Venus and my Mercury flanking those, like the apex of my yard from Scorpio moon conjunct Pluto in the 12th, Neptune in the 2nd, in Capricorn with the Sun conjunct the descendant, opposed the ascendant, and that Sun having Mercury in the 6th, in Gemini, and Venus in the 8th, in Cancer, in the tropical signs. That told him basically everything he needed to know about how I kind of like put my best foot forward when it comes to meeting people, and like how much energy I put out meeting people, and how the Chiron just generated a lot of like setbacks to pursuing my brand as an intellectual person, because I'm like, I can't relate to feeling elite. My knowledge has failed. I wasn't always the best. You know, in school I was like, there was something about like always being like first until grade 7, and then there was a year in grade 8 when I like didn't get any diplomas, and then grade 9, interestingly, then I was 27th. I still got an A average, but I was at a school in which it was very competitive, and I was literally the only colored kid in my class, so it was even more of a different systemic undertone that I kind of like felt the economics of not weighing out, but you know, needing to be strong and firm and keeping my keys to myself and knowing the secrets that I knew. You know, I could often get very much in trouble in relationships because it's like I get comfortable around people and then I express this or express that, or someone becomes an example of what I don't like or what I this or that, and then I would not think twice about like, oh, this person is gonna go to that person and say, did you know Kaylin said like just make a whole other thing out of what I said, or like take it to that person to like go and offend them with it, which like I didn't really understand, because my thing was, okay, I could have felt some type of way about somebody. I maybe wouldn't have felt the need to confront them because I was just allowing them to be themselves. And if something contextually came up where I had to say what a boundary was, and I needed to give the example of like how it would look if someone acted in the scope of or outside of the scope of that, and then I'm expressing these relationships to people, using people in my analogy to relationships, because my son is in the seventh house. So I'm like, I think everybody can like identify with like the way things connect between people and what they remember and what was said. But then I found out like, no, everybody does actually not do that, because like some people just have selective memory for what they want to know and want to hear, and it just becomes this Mrigashira gaslighting thing that happened on the seventh house cusp, where I am coming with a light of, this is what I saw, this is what I see, Sag, opposed to that with the gene key secret of light gate activation happening for me. And then, you know, expressing that, it kind of like puts a stop code onto that, because I'm like, oh, there's all these secret little things about words or people or nuance or psychodynamics or relationships, or the shadow side to Libra, the Saturn and the black of the sunset and the pastel array of the light show, and everything Venus and the veneer. And like it got to me to the point where I had to like really go to that Scorpio moon 12th house Pluto Sag place of like, okay, what is all these images in my brain? Like, why do I feel like a chimera? Why do I feel Purva Bhadrapada two-faced all the time, even when I'm trying to now express myself more clearly, because my articulation, my like vocabulary, it's all kind of like learning in a very, because I feel I have ADHD and probably Asperger's, which I can only relate to, not because I want to claim it for genius points, but because of the way social interaction has created a version of myself that how I remain self-sufficient without needing anybody. I have like a day of just being absent from the world and being completely absorbed in something that I am obsessed with. And that's how I kind of like recharge my batteries from interacting with people who can become draining after a while. Even like loud environments, or waking up to like people yelling or something like that, it's very disturbing to me, and I can't even really help it. I've looked into like complex PTSD and things like that, because I know that there were things that happened in the past where, I woke up to some crazy shit some nights. So it was like I could like see the analogy of what a psychoanalyst would like maybe tell me if I go to therapy. And I did go to therapy in my second year of university, because I think I was just experiencing burnout and narcissistic abuse syndrome, not knowing what it was at the time. And I was feeling like some type of borderline way with an abandonment issue, and feeling like I need to be there, I need to be there for people, I need to fix problems, and I just felt I had no identity outside of that at the time. And so that gave me this burnout, compounded with like social anxiety, compounded with years of like being an overachiever and like masking it and hiding it well, because I was always Jupitering in the third with a compensatory trine to that Chiron and Sun placement in the 7th and the 11th. So intellectually, I was able to always pep myself up. I could give people great advice. I gave my mom great advice, But in the heart of it, like, when my barriers started to like be worn down and things seep to the other side of that emotional barrier, with my Aquarius, I see it, and it went into the Piscean realm, right? And like, there's just something about going into my heart space and seeing the fact that I would need to exalt Pluto above Jupiter or Venus or Mercury or the moon or anything that can be linked with Pisces, for how its symbolism comes together in a Neptunian way. But if you know the relationship between like the Cyclops and Neptune and Pluto and Hades, and the forces that kind of like stabilize the planets and the orbits, ex post facto Velikovsky's theory, and where the birth of our archetypes and their relationship to each other as this family of quarreling, usurping, God knows what. Let me just put it like that. Because at this point, I don't know, like, my thing is like calling it asuras and then saying these cultures said they were gods. Okay, sure. What is the point of that? The point of it is, when nobody knew what the fuck was going on and it was just chaos happening in the sky, as above so below, our process, as within so without, gave birth to the words and the ideas related to Saturn eating his children like a Goya painting, or Venus as a mother, or Venus as a raging sick mad dragon, and all these other things, the Melusine, the Rohinies, the Medusas, the Algals, the Circes, the Liliths, the Persephones, the Virgos, it's like everything kind of like burst out of like the womb of creation at the galactic center. And it's like, what I can read in the story is the way kind of like our brain developed the enveloping story of the narrative, and like the patterns and neural connections we created like within, and in terms of evolution over time, and like going back and crystallizing things and rebelieving, and because of fear recapitulating like certain ideas and stereotypes, or this is a bad omen, or this or that. Like, I think our DNA just like remembers and remembers and remembers until this point. We are like kind of like programmable to be triggered by things this way or that way because of just like oral tradition in our DNA, light codes talk alongside to these stories on a subconscious level with our inner knowing. Because even if you don't relate to something in this moment dimension here and now, there could be lifetimes within which this potential can hold a key. And that is why the Saturn Moon conjunction and the figuring out my inner Aquarius archetype and musing upon one of my favorite muses and finding my voice by looking at the voice and having gone to the underworld, like her Persephone archetype, which I mistakenly just kind of like really lumped her in just because of a certain program that even wanted me to put her there. And then truly Scorpio Oxman and mastering the Zodiac and these Asterian coming together in the scheme of where it really is, seeing that she was Hydra, seeing all these heads coming out, seeing that snake handler, seeing what I said in my first video about she dealt with a lot of snakes. It all came together, guys. So I hope this video was helpful, and I hope it clarified some of the things that we spoke about. This is Kaylin, the Key Keeper. Keep peace, keep pure, keep strong, and keep key keying because the key is within you.